My name is Anna, and I want to tell you about one weekend that I will never forget because it was full of surprises, happy moments, and small adventures that made me feel like a child again, even though I am a grown woman with a normal, busy life. It all started on Friday evening after I finished work, and I was very tired because the whole week had been long and difficult, so I wanted to rest and maybe sleep a little more. But something told me that this weekend was going to be different from all the others I had before. I packed a small bag with a few clothes, my toothbrush, some snacks, and my favorite book, because I had a simple plan to visit my cousin Lisa, who lives near a lake outside the city, and we had not seen each other for a long time, even though we always promised to meet more often. When I arrived at the bus station, I saw that my bus was late, and I was a little upset at first, but then I sat on a bench, took out my book, and started reading. And soon I forgot about the time, because the story was so interesting that I didn't even notice the bus had arrived. The bus driver smiled at me and said I was lucky because he almost left without me. So I quickly climbed on the bus, found a window seat, and looked outside as the city slowly disappeared behind me, and the trees and fields became more and more beautiful. I love traveling by bus when I am not in a hurry because I can think about many things, like my dreams, my childhood, or the people I love. And sometimes I imagine that I am in a movie and the world outside is just part of a story that is made for me. After 2 hours, I arrived at Lisa's house, and she was already waiting for me at the door with a big smile. And when we hugged, it felt like no time had passed at all since our last meeting, even though it had been more than 6 months. Lisa had prepared a delicious dinner with pasta, salad, and fresh bread, and we ate together while talking about everything: work, friends, funny memories, and even a few sad things that we usually don't say out loud. But somehow it was easy to talk that night. Later, we sat on the couch with warm blankets and mugs of hot chocolate, and we watched an old movie we both loved as teenagers. And we laughed so much that my stomach hurt, and I felt very happy and relaxed like I hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning, we woke up early because Lisa had a surprise for me, and I was very curious. So I quickly got dressed and followed her to the car, and we drove for about 30 minutes until we reached a small village I had never been to before. There was a local market in the village with colorful stands selling handmade things like soap, candles, scarves, and jewelry, and the smell of fresh bread and flowers was everywhere, making the whole place feel like a dream or a scene from a fairy tale. We walked around, talked to friendly people, bought a few little things, and then sat on a bench near the bakery where we shared a big cinnamon roll and 2 cups of coffee that were so warm and sweet that I almost closed my eyes to enjoy every sip. Then, something unexpected happened. We saw a sign that said, "Horse Riding, Beginner's Welcome," and Lisa asked me if I wanted to try. And even though I was scared because I had never touched a horse in my life, I said yes, because it was the weekend and I wanted to do something new. The man who worked there was very kind and helped us get on the horses, and he walked beside us while we slowly rode through a forest path. And at first I was nervous and held the reins very tight, but after a while I started to relax and even smile. The horse was big but calm, and I felt like I was in a storybook, riding through the trees with sunlight falling through the leaves. And I kept thinking, why didn't I try this before? Because it was so peaceful and beautiful, and I wanted the moment to last forever. After the ride, we thanked the man and took some photos with the horses. And I knew that this was going to be one of those memories I would tell people about for years, because I had done something new, and I had done it with someone I love and trust. In the afternoon, we returned to Lisa's house and took a short nap because we were both a little tired, but it was the good kind of tired, like after a long walk or a day at the beach, and I slept with a smile on my face and the smell of the forest still in my hair. When we woke up, it was already getting dark, and Lisa suggested we have a picnic by the lake, even though it was a little cold outside. So we wore warm clothes, packed some sandwiches and drinks, and walked down to the water with a flashlight. The sky was full of stars, and the moon was shining so brightly that we didn't even need the flashlight anymore. And we sat on a blanket, eating, talking, and watching the light dance on the surface of the water like little silver fish. Suddenly, we heard a strange noise, and we both stopped talking and looked around, thinking maybe it was an animal. But then we saw two small deer walking near the trees, and they looked at us for a moment and then continued walking like we were not even there. We both stayed silent for a long time, just watching the stars and listening to the soft sound of the water and the quiet night. And I thought that sometimes the best things in life are not the big events, but the small, quiet moments that make you feel part of something beautiful. Later, when we returned home, we made tea and sat by the window, talking about our childhood, and Lisa told me a story I had never heard before, about how she once got lost in the woods and was found by an old woman who gave her candy and told her to follow a red bird. I laughed and said it sounded like a fairy tale, but she swore it really happened. And maybe it did, because sometimes life is full of small magic moments that we don't understand, but they stay with us and make the world feel bigger and more mysterious. The next day, we woke up late, had pancakes for breakfast, and decided to stay at home and paint, even though we are not good at painting. But we didn't care, and we spent hours laughing, making silly pictures, and getting colors all over our hands and faces. In the afternoon, I took a long bath while listening to music, and then I helped Lisa cook dinner, and we made pizza from scratch, which was not easy, but very fun, especially when we tried to throw the dough in the air and failed many times. That night, before going to bed, I looked at the photos we had taken, and I felt very lucky because I had spent a weekend that was full of laughter, kindness, little adventures, and love, and I knew that I would remember it for a long, long time. The next morning was Sunday, and I woke up feeling calm and warm inside, the way you feel when you know everything is okay and the world is quiet and soft, like a cozy blanket wrapped around your thoughts. I looked out of the window and saw that it had started to snow, which was a big surprise because the weather report had said nothing about snow, and the flakes were falling slowly, like feathers from the sky, covering the trees and the garden in a gentle white. Lisa was already in the kitchen making tea, and when I walked in, she smiled and said, "It's a perfect day to stay inside." But I looked at her with excitement and said, "No, it's the perfect day to go outside and do something crazy in the snow." She laughed and agreed, and we quickly got dressed in warm coats, scarves, and hats, and we put on boots and gloves, and then we ran outside like two kids who had never seen snow before, even though we both had many snowy days in our lives. The snow was fresh and deep enough to leave footprints, and we started walking through the trees behind her house. And soon we were throwing snowballs, building a small snowman, and even making snow angels by lying on the ground and waving our arms and legs. After playing for a while, we saw smoke in the distance and realized that one of Lisa's neighbors was having a fire in the backyard. So we walked over to say hello, and it turned out they were roasting sausages and marshmallows and invited us to join. We stood by the fire with them, warming our hands, drinking hot apple juice, and talking about simple things like winter, food, and how peaceful everything felt when the snow was falling so slowly, as if time itself had decided to take a rest. One of the neighbors was an old man named Eric, and he told us a funny story about the time he tried to ski for the first time when he was already 60 years old, and he said he fell down so many times that even the trees were laughing at him. Everyone laughed, and the mood was so friendly and warm that I almost forgot I was just a guest in this place, because it felt like I belonged there, like I had lived in that quiet, snowy village for years, not just for the weekend. Later, we returned home with red cheeks, cold noses, and big smiles, and we changed into dry clothes and sat near the heater with thick socks and cups of soup, talking about how small things like friendly people and soft snow can make a day feel special. In the afternoon, we started packing my things slowly because I had to return home in the evening, and we both felt a little sad, not because anything was wrong, but because we had enjoyed our time together so much that it was hard to say goodbye. While I folded my clothes and placed my book and scarf into the bag, Lisa said, "Let's write a list of all the things we did this weekend so we don't forget any of them." And I thought it was a lovely idea, so we sat down and made a long, silly list. We wrote things like cinnamon rolls in the village, horse riding like queens, laughing until we cried during the movie, deer under the stars, and almost dying from pizza dough on the ceiling. And by the end of the list, we were laughing again. Before I left, Lisa gave me a small gift, a tiny silver ring with a blue stone, and she said, "This is not expensive, but when you wear it, remember this weekend, and remember that even a short time can be full of magic if you open your heart." I hugged her tightly and we both had tears in our eyes, but they were happy tears because we knew that we would see each other again, and we knew that our friendship was something strong and beautiful that nothing could break. The bus ride back home was quiet, and I listened to soft music while looking out the window, watching the snow-covered fields and sleepy houses pass by, thinking about how lucky I was to have people in my life who made me feel seen and loved. When I arrived at home, it was already dark, and I lit a candle in the living room and sat with a blanket and a cup of tea, not doing anything, just sitting quietly and letting the memories of the weekend play in my mind like a soft movie. That night, I slept very well, and in my dream, I was back in the forest, on the horse, riding through the trees with the wind in my hair, and when I woke up, I felt peaceful, like I had been given a small treasure that I could carry with me in my heart forever. In the next days, I told my friends about the weekend, and they all said, "Wow, that sounds amazing!" And I realized that not everything amazing has to be big or expensive. Sometimes the most amazing thing is just to laugh, try something new, and spend time with someone who understands you. One of my friends, Clara, listened very carefully and then said, "Next time, take me with you." And I smiled and said, "Maybe next time we will all go together and have a weekend adventure in the snow." And the idea made me happy and excited. During the week, Every time I looked at the ring Lisa gave me, I felt a soft joy inside, like a secret memory that only I knew, and it helped me stay calm when work was hard or the city felt too loud and busy. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail from Lisa, and inside was a photo we had taken with the snowman, with the words "Forever Young at Heart" written on the back. And I laughed out loud because our snowman had the funniest nose made of a crooked carrot. I put the photo on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a cat, and every morning when I made coffee, I looked at the picture and smiled, remembering how good it felt to be silly, free, and full of joy, even if only for a few days. The following weekend was much more quiet, and I stayed in the city, doing laundry, cleaning my apartment, and going to the store. But even during those small, everyday moments, I felt different, like the joy of last weekend was still with me in a quiet way. One day, while I was walking to the market, I passed a small stable with ponies in the yard, and I stopped to look at them, smiling, because I remembered the horse I rode and how proud I felt after trying something new and doing it even though I was afraid. That small moment reminded me that life is always full of little chances to grow, to smile, to feel alive. We just have to say yes more often, even when we are tired, afraid, or think we don't have time for something unexpected. And now, every time someone asks me, "How was your weekend?" I don't just say, "It was nice." I tell them the story, the whole beautiful story, with the deer, the horses, the snow, and the laughter. Because I think good stories are meant to be shared like gifts. A few weeks passed, and I was back in my normal routine, waking up early, drinking coffee, going to work, talking to the same people, answering emails, and doing all the usual things that fill the hours of the day until it is time to sleep again. But something had changed inside me since that weekend with Lisa, and I could feel it even in small moments, like when I noticed a bird singing outside my window, or when I walked a little slower to enjoy the sunshine instead of rushing everywhere like before. One Friday afternoon, I was walking home when I received a voice message from Lisa, and she said, "Guess what? The village is having a winter festival next weekend. Lanterns, music, food, and even fireworks." And just like that, my heart jumped with excitement. I called her back and said, "Say no more. I'll be there." And I started planning my trip, even though I knew the weather might be cold or the buses might be late, because the memory of our last weekend was still glowing inside me like a soft candle. This time, I packed not just clothes and snacks, but also a small notebook and a pen, because I wanted to write down my thoughts and little moments so I wouldn't forget them, the way we sometimes forget the best parts of life when we are too busy. When I arrived in the village, it was already getting dark, and the streets were glowing with small golden lights hanging between the trees and houses, and it felt like walking inside a snow globe where everything was peaceful, magical, and full of joy. Lisa met me at the little train station with a big scarf and an even bigger smile. And as soon as we hugged, it felt like no time had passed at all, because true connection doesn't fade just because a few weeks go by. We walked to the festival together, and there were children running with lanterns shaped like stars and animals, and the smell of roasted chestnuts, sweet waffles, and hot chocolate made my stomach growl even though I had eaten on the train. There was a small wooden stage where a group of people were singing songs in soft voices, and we stood there for a long time just listening, not talking, letting the music fill the space between us like warm air on a cold night. Later, we found a stall where you could write a wish on a piece of paper and hang it on a tree full of colorful lights. So we each took a paper and a pen and wrote something from our hearts, without showing each other what it was. I won't tell you what I wrote because some wishes are quiet and personal, but I will say that it had to do with more weekends like that. Weekends full of beauty, laughter, kindness, and the feeling of being truly alive. As we walked through the festival, we suddenly saw a group of dancers wearing strange costumes made of bells and colorful ribbons, and they began to dance in a circle while playing small drums. And I didn't know if it was a local tradition or just something fun, but it was amazing to watch. One of the dancers came to us, smiled, and offered us each a ribbon. And before I could think too much, I found myself dancing in the circle with strangers, laughing and spinning like a child at a birthday party, completely free and full of light. Lisa joined in too, and we danced until we were out of breath. And then we sat down on a bench with cups of tea, holding our sides and laughing, and I thought, if someone had told me last month that I would be dancing in the snow with bells on my wrists, I wouldn't have believed them. After the dancing, we walked toward the lake where the fireworks would begin, and we found a quiet place near the edge of the water, wrapped ourselves in blankets, and waited in the silence that always comes before something beautiful begins. When the first firework exploded in the sky, it was like a flower of gold and red, and the sound echoed in the valley, making the water shimmer with reflections. And for a few minutes, everyone just stood there, looking up, eyes wide, mouths open, hearts full. I looked at Lisa and saw that she had tears in her eyes, not because she was sad, but because some moments are too big for words, and our hearts don't know what to do except let the feelings fall out as tears. After the fireworks, we walked home slowly, talking about everything and nothing, like people do when they are happy and don't want the day to end. And when we got to her house, we stayed up late, sitting on the floor with candles and music, making drawings and telling silly stories. The next day, we decided to visit the little art museum in the village that I had never been to before, and even though it was small, it had beautiful paintings made by local artists, and each one told a story in colors that spoke louder than words. There was one painting I loved the most. It showed a woman walking in a forest with a red scarf flying behind her. And even though her face was small and simple, something about her posture made me feel strong, like she was brave and calm at the same time. I asked the woman at the museum if the painting was for sale, and she said yes. So I bought a small print of it, and now it hangs in my bedroom at home, reminding me to walk with courage and joy, just like the woman in the painting. On Sunday evening, before I returned to the city, Lisa and I wrote one more list like last time, but this time we called it Moments That Made Our Hearts Smile. And it included things like dancing with ribbons, the smell of waffles, a shy boy who gave us a rose, and a red scarf in a painting. As I sat on the train going back, watching the snowy hills roll by, I felt a deep sense of peace, not because everything in my life was perfect, but because I had created beautiful memories that would stay with me, even when days got hard or boring. Now, whenever I feel tired or sad or lost, I close my eyes and go back to those weekends, the horse ride, the snowman, the deer by the lake, the laughter on the floor, the quiet walks, the dancing in the night, the colors of the fireworks, and the sound of Lisa's voice when she says my name. This is the story of my weekend, or really, the story of 2 weekends that reminded me how much beauty and surprise the world can hold when we say yes, when we open our hearts, and when we let ourselves live fully, even for just a few days. I still go to work, still answer emails, still go to the supermarket and wash my dishes. But now I carry something special inside me, like a secret song only I can hear, and it makes everything feel just a little more magical, even on the most ordinary days. So if you ever feel like life is too fast or too full of the same things, I hope you find a weekend like mine. Not perfect, not planned, but full of love, laughter, and small wonders that remind you how sweet it is to be alive. And maybe one day, when you're sitting by the window with a warm drink in your hand and snow falling softly outside, you will think of your own beautiful weekend, and you will smile, just like I am smiling now.